Hey there, this is John King of the Batalogues, and I am incredibly honored to be sitting with Chip Kidd, who is an Eisner Award-winning author, editor, and designer who's done a lot of important work with Batman over the years that is an outgrowth of an obsession.
Oh, certainly. Yes, I would definitely say so.
And what do you think is behind that obsession? Because it seems to me like it latches on in childhood.
Oh, yeah,
And
of course.
for whatever reason, and I think there are good reasons, but we don't quite outgrow it, or as we mature, that, there's still resource there.
Yes, I mean, when I was 2, the original Batman TV show was broadcast on primetime, and I have no doubt that was the start of it. Yeah, but that led to comic books and whatever TV there was after that, Super Friends or what have you. But yeah, sometimes it's hard to say what fuels any obsession. I think sometimes it's clear and sometimes it's not.
I would argue a lot of it has to do with the design of Batman.
Yeah,
and the look of it.
I think so.
Just the visual look of the character conveys so much of story before we even find out anything that has happened.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would totally agree with that. Yes.
So your own Batman story, Death by Design, I found to be incredibly charming and really pleasurably disorienting.
Disorienting in what way?
Well, a couple of ways. One is that the story is about architecture. And one of the things that I love about your Batman story is it's a detective story.
Yes.
And sometimes that gets lost in the Batman storytelling that, he began in Detective Comics.
Yeah.
And so...
Yeah, it's not just about hitting somebody or hitting a lot of people at once.
And so there's that component where, this is a relatively quiet Batman story.
Yes.
Not that many characters. And the characters are fairly developed. And then the illustration style with all the different colored pencils is kind of a really interesting way of generating this. It's not nostalgic. And it would be very easy to try and go back because it's a Golden Age story.
Yes, it is.
But it doesn't use the Golden Age comic style. Instead, it kind of reproduces more of a fine art style from that period.
I would say that's true. Yeah. I mean, the artist is a guy named Dave Taylor, who's British, and his father was an architect, actually, which I didn't know. I mean, that's not why I picked him. But the whole sort of point of it, well, not point, like the whole art direction of it is supposed to make it look like what if Fritz Lang was able to make a Batman movie in the late 30s and had a big budget to do it? And what if you could somehow cast Montgomery Clift and Grace Kelly in the lead roles?
So kind of noir, soft focus at times.
Yes.
And the Joker makes an appearance, and I find the way that he's illustrated is pretty amazing in that, he's familiar, but he's not the Joker I know.
Yeah, no, it's very German expressionist, and it's very...
like he could be a refugee from Caligari.
Yes, I would say so. But he's also a dandy. I love the way Dave dressed him, especially at the beginning. It's really kind of that. I mean, that to me was part of who the Joker was. That he dressed up.
And you're responsible for returning or perhaps presenting for the first time for mainstream Batman readers Bat Manga.
Yes.
Japanese Batman comics that were commissioned around the time of the TV show when it hit Japan.
That's a true passion project on my part. I was thrilled that I was able to do that.
So this is a way of generating an artistic product out of an addiction.
Well, it's also to me it was like a great scavenger hunt, and to me it was like being a Beatles fan and like discovering that they recorded an album in Japan while they were on tour and just never bothered to release it, or
songs we'd never heard.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's fascinating to me.
And if you love manga comic books, there's so much, that's this wonderful cultural mix in that.
Well, yes, and the fact that the artist, he was the artist and the writer, Jiro Kawada, co-created this Japanese character called Eighth Man, was amazing to me because I used to watch Eighth Man cartoons as a kid on TV as well. I grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia, and we had it was cable channel, and they got all these Japanese import shows to show kids because I guess it was really cheap to do that. So we had Astro Boy and Ultraman and Gigantor and Eighth Man, and I loved Eighth Man as a kid. And then, but that really did go away. I mean, it didn't. I don't know what you want to say. It didn't. It didn't catch on in the States, and wasn't published as a comic in the States. But then it was a long gestation. But I found out that, the guy who did Eighth Man did Batman, and I was just amazed, absolutely amazed.
And Robin sometimes takes a really active part. It seems like he and Batman take turns being the smart one.
Well, and also he's a kid, and I really liked that. He's whatever he is, 10 or 11 years old again, or 13, and
makes for a more dangerous story.
Yeah, and it's just kind of great, and the costumes are pretty much the classic costumes. I mean, Kawada adds a bit of his personal touch to them, but I was able to virtually interview him through a third party in Japan who went up to visit him, and I gave her a bunch of my questions. And basically he said that the publisher, Shonen Gaho, said, we want to do this, and it has to happen right away. And so he almost didn't accept it because he didn't, quote, know how to draw like an American cartoonist, which I think that's so great that he didn't, because it wouldn't look nearly as interesting if he had somehow trained to try and draw Carmine Infantino, or it's better to have it look the way it does.
You have so many books by Batman. I don't have them all in my shrine here. It couldn't fit them all into my bag, but Batman Collected and Batman Cover to Cover. And there is something pretty amazing at watching just how much, I think the word evolved probably undersells just how many different variations there have been to even the basic approach to the iconography of Batman and what the character is supposed to look like.
Right.
So how in the heck do you choose what goes into these books?
Well, and actually, for the record, I'm not the author of the cover to cover book. I mean, I think I contributed something to it, but it's not. I don't consider it, quote, my book, as opposed to Batman Animated, which I am the co-author of, and which. Again, all of these to me are passion projects. I don't do any of this, quote, for the money or whatever. I do it because I love it. So, it all just depends on what's been done, what hasn't been done, what needs to be done, and what should be done. And the Bat Manga thing is a perfect example. And at the time I pitched it to DC, Paul Levitz was still the president, and I got an audience with him and showed him a 40-page proposal, and he looked at it and basically said, I had no idea that this existed. No idea. And if you know Paul Levitz, that's a pretty big deal, because he knows everything.
And if this were a recent phenomenon, there's no way it would have slipped through the cracks. But over the years, right, the comics business wasn't this perfectly organized.
Well, it was 1966 and 67, and it was all of this stuff was happening at once. I can't begin to imagine what that was like with the licensing and the show and the mania and whatever. I mean, all of these Japanese stories are licensed officially, but DC had no record of it. In fact, for that, their legal team, which of course by now is considerable, had to research to make sure that they still had the copyright to this, and they did.
So you've edited a bunch of books of Alex Ross's art, including a few for DC. So it seems like there's so much wonderful art that he's created in ways that it seems like he makes, these heroes super heroic and vulnerable at the same time.
Yeah, well, I think so. I mean, he makes them real, so they're vulnerable insofar as they look like real people. I would argue, say, as opposed to Bruce Timm, who I think is a genius and I love, but his versions are very much cartoon versions and they don't look like real people, but doesn't mean that there isn't an emotional connection to them. It's just I would say it's a different emotional connection. It's almost like along the lines of Charles Schulz, where it's reductive and you're reducing a drawing to its essential basic parts, whereas Alex is doing the opposite of that. He's completely, literally fleshing them out.
And with the color, it just, the way that the light seems to work, you get the sense that they're in a very real space.
Yes, and a very real space that has, at this point, been copied countless times on screen. It never ceases to amaze me going to, a superhero movie, and it can be either Marvel or DC, but inevitably there will be a couple scenes where you just think, that's Alex's lighting, or that's Alex's staging, or that's Alex's angle. It's pretty amazing, pretty undeniable.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me about Batman.
Well, thank you.